Hi, everybody. Welcome to Casita Coalition's first webinar of 2025. This legislative update will review state housing bills that Casita Coalition is sponsoring, supporting, and opposing. My name is Jonathan Pacheco Bell, VP of Policy and Programs at Casita Coalition and the moderator for today. Joining me are panelists with deep knowledge and insights about housing and legislation. Luis Mirante, Vice President of Public Policy at the Bay Area Council and Casita Coalition board member. Hi, Luis.
Hello.
And Celeste Goyer, VP of Research and Operations at Casita Coalition. Luis, Celeste, thank you for joining us today. Let's dive right in. The first thing that we want to cover is an overview of where we are in the legislative year with our housing bills. Luis, would you mind giving us a high-level overview of where we find ourselves today?
Sure. So 2025, 2026 are the 2 years of this legislative session. California has a 2-year legislative session, so we're in the first year of it. Right now, we're heading into probably the busiest time in the legislature, at least in the first year session. We have the first policy committee deadlines pending on Friday of next week, which means the legislature has to get all of its bills through policy committees by that day. The legislature is well known for leaving all the most difficult items to the last minute, and this year is no exception. So Sacramento is a flurry of activity, both on our bills and on all the other challenging proposals that legislators are putting forward. Just to situate that in a broader context, right now we're sort of we're out of the policy development process that happens in December, January, February. We're into the first part of the policy review process that will happen in these first policy committees. Over the summer, the legislature will shift its focus to the budget, which is presenting challenges, and things like tariffs are introducing a lot of uncertainty about how much money the state has. And so there's a lot of uncertainty about how much money the state can spend. In the latter part of the summer, August, we'll see the final conclusion of bills that are moving forward this year. And then in September, the governor will start taking action on the vast majority of bills that reach his desk. This process starts up again in January. If a bill dies at this point in the year, it doesn't really die until it fails to pass its first policy committee in January of 2026. So just keep that in mind. We have some bills that we'll talk about that have already met their end, but we'll keep an eye on them until they really meet their end in January of 2026.
Excellent. Thank you for that overview, Luis. Very helpful for all of us and our audience. Celeste, we're going to toss it over to you to start our discussion about the Casita Coalition bills, and we'll start with the ones that we are sponsoring.
Great. Okay, so this year we have 3 priority bills that we're sponsoring. And the first one is SB 543 from Senator McNerney. This is an ADU cleanup bill that reorganizes the code sections where JADU law lives, and it creates more parity. So all of the law sections that apply to ADU law now will apply to JADU law. Just as one example, right now, local agencies can go above and beyond state law and be more permissive for ADUs, but they cannot for JADUs. So 543 will fix that. And the update on that, its next hearing is with Senate Local Government Committee very, very soon, in the next day or two. And Jonathan will be going to Sacramento to testify for that one. Next is AB 6 from Assemblymember Ward. And this is a study bill that just gets the ball rolling with figuring out how we can apply residential building code for middle housing developments. Those are small unit count developments instead of a commercial building code, which is more stringent and more expensive. So this requires HCD to get the ball rolling with that, create a working group, and come up with a report. That status is that it's moving into Assembly Housing and Committee and Housing and Community Development Committee with a hearing in the next day or two. Jonathan will also be testifying for that one. And then finally, AB 413 from Assemblymember Fong. This is a bill that will require state agencies that do ADU public resources, such as the ADU handbook, to publish them and to make them available online in the main languages of the California population. So we're very proud to sponsor that and our other bills that we're sponsoring.
Yeah, and that one, AB 413, is on consent, going to appropriations. Louis, your thoughts on these bills? We have a lot of activity in the ADU space and in the middle housing space. We have things on language equity. We have things on ADU and JADU parity, looking at the California Residential Code instead of the building code as a way to potentially make it a little bit more feasible and doable and less onerous. Your thoughts initially on the bills that we are sponsoring?
Well, I'll say it's exciting that we're seeing a new crop of legislators step up to champion ADUs. Folks on the call will probably recall that Senator Skinner and Assemblymember Ting have been incredible champions for ADU and missing middle policy through their legislative career. Those legislative careers, though, came to an end with term limits last year. And many of us advocates were wondering who would step up to fill the enormous gap that both of those are leaving in the legislature. These bills seem to enjoy pretty wide popularity in the legislature right now. That's really encouraging to me that the legislature is still inclined to ADU policy. There are some wrinkles. We'll talk about them later on, but overall, I'm pretty excited about what we're working on and the fact that legislators are stepping up to fill the gap left by our champions being termed out last year.
And I certainly saw popularity and support when I was at the Senate Housing Committee on the 22nd of April for the bills that we testified for, and then we were in the space for supporting, even if we didn't testify. And I anticipate that continuing when I'm back at the Capitol on the 30th. Let's move on to Casita Coalition supported bills. What do we have, Celeste?
So two of our priority bills we're supporting this year are AB 1154 from Assemblymember Juan Carrillo. And this is a bill that would remove the owner occupancy requirement for junior ADUs that do not share a bath with the primary. And it also removes parking requirements for ADUs under 500 square feet. So it might seem like a small thing, but anytime you can remove an owner occupancy, the ability for a local agency to require owner occupancy for a type of ADU, you're opening it up to more uptake by folks who can use this to create housing in their homes. And the status on that is currently, let's see, it is on the assembly floor for the third reading. So that one's moving along well. And does that mean it's up for a vote soon, Louis?
The Assembly second reading file, I'm sorry, you said it's third reading?
Third reading, yeah.
The Assembly third reading file is the file that the legislature can take up on the Assembly floor at any time.
Okay.
So I would estimate that the bill's voted on at some point in the next couple of weeks and then passed on to the Senate, where it starts the process anew.
Great. Okay, and then also SB 9, the new SB 9 2025, folks on this call will remember the SB 9, which is more famous. But this one is from Senator Arguin, and this removes the owner occupancy for existing ADUs. Previous legislation has removed it for all ADUs built since 2020. And this means that a city cannot say an owner of a property must live in either the ADU or the primary home in order to develop an ADU. Well, this was being implemented unevenly kind of around the state, with some jurisdictions removing previous owner occupancy deed restrictions, for instance, on units older than that. And it was spotty and causing confusion. And so the thought was that this bill would just eliminate that and take care of that across the board so we have consistent implementation. And that bill is currently in Senate Local Government Committee for a hearing in early May.
And indeed, we do need to clarify that this is a different and new SB 9. I've already answered some questions from community groups in LA who reached out to ask me which SB9 is this? And I'm letting him know it's the new one. So we have a theme here with the supported bills. Both of these are addressing owner occupancy requirements for ADUs and JADUs. Let's discuss the issue with owner occupancy requirements. I'd like to make this very clear for everyone on the call. What is the concern about owner occupancy requirements? What do they do? What do they limit? How do they interact with and potentially change the intention of ADU and JADU law? Lewis?
Great question. We generally are very supportive of ownership policy at the Casita Coalition. Folks may remember that we were the sponsors of AB 1033, which actually allowed the separate condoization of ADUs for home ownership products. That was a big victory for us. But the owner occupancy requirements that we've seen around the country have operated to chill the production of ADUs for various reasons. And that's something that we're not as supportive of. We've worked to remove barriers to ADU production, and we've come to recognize that the owner occupancy requirement can be one of those barriers. This was an early lesson from Portland. Portland removed its owner occupancy requirements from ADUs and then saw a big uptick in the production of ADUs. That also was the lesson in California later on. We removed ADUs from the owner occupancy allowance under a Bloom bill in, I think, 2017. And that was part of the big renaissance that folks on the call, I'm sure, will be familiar with. Operate to chill housing production because owners can get a little bit nervous about what that requirement means for them personally. They worry about their ability to sell the home if there's a tenant in the ADU because they want to be able to sell it to any willing buyer. They don't want to necessarily have to sell it to an owner occupant. It can also chill production because a lot of the people who are building ADUs are building them as developers and then selling the home to another person. That's particularly important for small builders, folks who are typically more representative of California as a whole, both in the income they make and in their race and ethnicity. So for a lot of reasons, equity first among them, owner occupancy requirements can be a problem that we are working to resolve. The bills here mostly focus on the big change they make is on junior ADUs.
Mm-hmm.
And we've worked in the past on ADU policy related to owner occupancy permits. Folks will probably recall the several bills we've worked on in recent years. SB9 makes those changes crystal clear and solid. There has been some disagreement in local government land about what our previous bills did. This will clarify that. That's important because when there's disagreement among local governments, it's usually the anti-housing opinion that prevails. And
Celeste,
so this is all just us fighting for the ADU industry and for more ADU production in general. Sorry, Jonathan.
thank you, Lewis. Celeste, we have a really good foundation from Lewis, but I know you have more to add. Your thoughts on owner occupancy?
Sure. So I think one other point, all of what Lewis said is absolutely true about the chilling effect of owner occupancy requirements. But one thing I want to add is that they can form a problem for lenders because, I mean, think about it. If you're a bank and you own a property, well, a bank can't be an owner occupant. So it can make it challenging to get financing. And the other thing I just wanted to point out, if you're wondering why would we remove the owner occupancy requirement for junior ADUs that share a bath, well, it does make sense if you think about it. Suppose you have two renters in a home, one in the primary home, one in an attached suite called a junior ADU that shares a bath. Now, we know that's allowed under ADU law, but suppose your two renters get in a little disagreement and they start to have a fight. Well, if the renter in the primary home can lock the door and prevent the junior ADU occupant from using the bathroom, this was not good. So, so it was thought that we keep this distinction.
Yeah, some of these bills, they might be very well intended. They might have good thoughts behind them, and the author may really be thinking about the community, but we're part of this conversation to let them know that there's a bigger picture. There's a lot more happening. There's more to see. So this is why we are supporting these types of bills that address owner occupancy issues and other issues. Let's move on to now the bills that Casita Coalition is opposing. And this one is sort of in flux even as we prepared for this. Celeste, let's start up with AB 1055.
So every year, Casita Coalition generally has one or two bills that we do come out and either oppose or oppose unless amended. And this year, we have been speaking with the bill author and our allies and our membership to rally opposition to AB 1055 from Assemblymember Horner. And this bill would require proof of residential occupancy for 6 months of every year that a homeowner has their ADU for 10 years. And so it creates an enforcement mechanism and the requirement for affidavits. It is really a very, I would say, damaging concept to burden homeowners with this requirement. And it's not a usual thing that we require for any other type of housing. So we appreciate all of our members who wrote letters in opposition to it, and we believe that the flexibility of use of an ADU is one of the things most prized by the homeowners who build them, because the changes in our life can be your life can change on a dime. Your elder parent may need to move in. Your child may come back from school. There are all kinds of things. How about a pandemic? I mean, you need a home office that's safe. So all kinds of things can happen that you would not be able to plan for or respond to under a structure such as this. So there is an update on this bill, and Louis, you want to share the status update?
Sure. As all of Celeste's hard work has paid dividends for our members, we were able to get this bill turned into a 2-year bill. That means it won't advance to the governor this year. It gives us more time to work out some of the policy concerns we have with the author. I think the author here, Assemblymember Borner, was pretty surprised to hear about opposition to this bill. She probably thought the bill did something different than what it actually does, or what our view is of what it does. We'll have that dialogue over the next year, and folks should be a part of it. Be engaged with our
Mhm.
our membership groups, be engaged with Jonathan and Celeste, be engaged on our calls to action. These are all good opportunities for us to make sure that our voices are heard on good and bad policy alike.
I think about AB 1055 from my background as a local agency municipal planner and code enforcement inspector. And I imagine if this passed, back in that role, I would have to potentially inspect people's homes and make sure every 6 months that it's being used
Right.
exactly how they said 6 months before, even if life changes. I think about the annual certification requirement that spans a decade, and from my role of going into people's homes and inspecting and interacting with them at their doorstep, I really see this as it's a bit much. We can inspect for health and safety, of course, making sure that our structures are built properly. But to burden my community members with this in my prior role, I would have had some feelings about it. So I'm glad to see the update to a 2-year bill, and thank you, Celeste, again for getting on the horn with the bill author and getting us to this point.
Yes, and I think that this bill would have encouraged people to build ADUs under the radar if
Exactly.
if that was the alternative, and that's not good for anybody. It
Right.
adds liability for homeowners. It removes health and safety inspections for tenants. It's just, yeah, a negative.
I
Okay.
can confirm that from my experience. The more barriers you put up, the greater likelihood that people will build informally. So
Yeah.
it seems like we're going in the right direction with this.
Yeah.
How about AB 906, something that just came across our radar?
Yep.
Celeste?
We just added this to our opposed list today, in fact. and it's from Assembly Member Mark Gonzalez. And it would require ADUs to have deed restrictions in order to be counted as affordable units under the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, which is a required step that cities have to take in order to meet the goals that are set in their housing elements. Currently, ADUs you can use rent surveys or other studies that show a certain percentage of the ADUs are affordable in order to count them. And this would require that only ADUs with deed restrictions could be counted. This is not a helpful idea, and it sets a precedent that could be really problematic moving forward. So we'll be reaching out to folks to join our oppose effort on this one. In particular, ADUs are considered to be naturally occurring affordable housing, and they're incredibly important in that role, in that it's so hard to build affordable housing in our cities. And homeowners are taking this on in order to create housing and to meet their own needs for financial stability and for their families. So any requirement for deed restrictions, particularly when a subsidy is not included to offset that, is a real problem for the ADU industry and will definitely chill production, and also would encourage the use of more deed restrictions on all of the incentive programs and the other local programs that help folks build ADUs.
And we know that jurisdictions, cities and counties need to meet the RENA numbers.
Yeah.
At the same time, we know that, as we discussed on this call, that the more obstacles you create for ADUs, the more it can thwart their development. Louis, a little bit more, if you could, on deed restrictions, the challenge
Sure.
and the issue behind the deed restriction itself. Fundamentally, what does that do, and how does it create concerns for accessory dwelling units?
I think first and foremost, a deed restriction on an ADU can really spook homeowners out of wanting to take this big step. An ADU is a pretty large investment for a homeowner. Deed restrictions are a pretty common thing for multifamily production in the commercial space. You have property managers, you have experts, you have broad industry familiarity with this as a concept that you don't have when it comes to California's homeowners. We're nervous, very nervous about what these types of things could do to chill homeowners' interest in producing ADUs. And so where we see that dynamic at play, as I mentioned with the owner occupancy requirements, we're going to try to take the side of folks who are interested in building an ADU, but not interested in being subject to the same type of regulatory scrutiny that professionals might be subject to in other places.
Yeah, and there are programs who have an option for, say, more
Right.
subsidy if you do a deed restriction. That seems like a feasible way to approach it, so that you have an exchange of value. But requiring them all to have it in order to be counted as affordable is, yeah, it could
Right.
set us back.
All right, Louis, Celeste, thank you again. We're going to start wrapping it up with this final question. How would you characterize the 2025 housing legislative season in one word? And feel free to elaborate a little bit after. We'll start with Celeste.
I would say surprising, but perhaps this happens every year. We think we're going to have a relatively quiet year after a lot of intensity with ADU bills coming through the sessions, but and then we're surprised by a big activity and a lot of ADU and JADU related bills. It's still seen as a very effective housing success story, and so we think that they're still interested in fine tuning it and leveraging it for other success. But so I would say surprising. Louis?
I would say building. This is a real building year for both the legislature on ADU policy and for the Casita Coalition as an advocacy organization. We have to build new relationships with new members. We have to build up knowledge among members who are there and active on ADU policy about ADU policy so that they're getting it right. It's all the more reason that our members should be involved with our advocacy campaigns and should be involved with our membership meetings. We really need their knowledge so that we can transmit it in the best available knowledge along with the nice bow to the legislature, which is really kind of building up the capacity it had again with some of the people who got term limited out of the legislature.
Thank you, Celeste and Louis. And for our viewers today and beyond, if you're interested in getting more involved with Casita Coalition, reach out. We are on all social media. You can find us at our website, casitacoalition.org. I want to thank our members and our sponsors for supporting the work of Casita Coalition. Thanks to our viewers for joining us for this first legislative update and webinar for 2025. We'll see you again at our upcoming webinars this year. And our next is May 21st on the topic of the Build the Middle Playbook, a national resource that we developed in partnership with Zillow. And before we forget, we want everybody to save the date, August 14 and 15, 2025, Casita Coalition's Build the Middle convening in Los Angeles. We'll see you there. Thanks, everybody.